What's up, guys? Clutch Fank Thursday, and today bringing a StringKing Type 4 lacrosse mesh review. Before we dive into the review, I want to give a huge thanks to StringKing whenever they come out with new products, heads, shafts, mesh, whatever it is. They're always kind enough and really reach out to me and see if I want to try their products, and of course I always say yes. But like I said, huge thanks to StringKing yet again for sending me the piece of 4X and 4S before they were released. When I do reviews, I typically wait about 2 or 3 weeks after a product comes out for a couple reasons. One, having it 3 or 4 days before it hits the shelves, it really doesn't give me a whole lot of time to mess around with it. Mesh-wise, string it up a bunch of different ways, shoot with it, pass with it, and play with it. It also allows me to watch other people's reviews, like Mainly Mesh and Spartan Strings, so that way I can kind of touch on other things they don't touch on. So ideally, if you were to watch, let's say, Spartan Strings video first and then come to watch this video, you may have two different people's reviews, but two whole different ideas. Or, I can touch on things they say or make sure I cover things they didn't cover that I thought should be covered. So without further ado, let's dive into the mesh review. Obviously covering the basics, StringKing Type 4 mesh is about 10 grams lighter than Type 3 mesh. It's also lighter than, I think, any performance mesh on the market. So the thickness and the lightness of the mesh has been covered already. It's a fairly thin mesh. It doesn't feel quite as thick. So I don't really need to cover a whole lot on that. One thing I did want to cover that not a lot of people talk about or see is the mesh actually comes with a 6-month durability guarantee, which is basically a warranty. So since the mesh is so thin and so light, there were a lot of people, including myself, who were a little worried about the mesh ripping or tearing with use, stringing some really tight knots and pulling the mesh down, but rest assured there's a 6-month guaranteed warranty. With that being said, there's also a couple instances I've seen people on Instagram and other social medias where a piece of mesh rips after a month or 2 months or whatever. Most of the time companies say, send us an email, we'll get you out a new piece, but having a 6-month warranty, just make sure that you have the reassurance that's going to be exactly what you're looking for. And if it doesn't quite work out or rips on you, then it's covered for 6 months, which is a whole season. Outside of that, the texture of the mesh is quite improved. One thing I really liked with 3S and 3X was there was a nice kind of almost sandpaper or gritty texture to the inside of the mesh, which I thought was great because it allowed for a lot more ball control, ball hold, and also added a bit more hold to your pocket. With 4S and 4X, they actually increased that feel. So when you pull it out of the package, it actually feels fairly rough, which is something I'm a huge fan of. I think it's great. I think that adding some texture to it is simply incredible. Not only that, but the additional texture out on top of Type 3 really allows for a mesh to feel top quality and feel like it's potentially a game changer. Another thing that I saw in this mesh itself and not a lot of people covering was the elasticity of the mesh, which is a huge thing for me. Back last year I used pretty much Hero Mesh throughout the entirety of my season simply because after I stretched a pocket or after I strung a pocket with something crazy, pull downs going down here, if I stretched the pocket high, since the mesh had a high elasticity, the mesh naturally, even though it was set to sit lower, would sit a little higher based off of where I pound the pocket. The only problem with the elasticity in Hero Mesh or any other type of mesh out there is that the more you use it and the more you stretch it out, the more it's going to bag out and the more possibilities there are of the actual mesh ripping where you stretch it. With Type 4, since they do have tri-twist technology, I don't think there's going to be any problems with that. There's 3 different yarns that are twisted throughout the entire mesh, which really allow for the elasticity, the durability, and a bit of the stretch and kind of integrity of the mesh, how it stays the same. One thing I did notice, and I stretched this pocket a lot, was if you look closely, you can kind of tell that these diamonds in this area where the pocket is, they seem a little larger than a diamond down here, simply because where you stretch the pocket out, since there's only 3 different yarns, the mesh actual holes themselves do stretch out a bit, which is not a problem at all. I actually think it's something great. When you string up a pocket and you really kind of stretch the area where you want the pocket to sit, having a slightly larger diamond, almost like a simplified ECD vortex mesh, will allow for a bit more hold in the mesh, which, just another win-win with Type 4. Not a lot of people covered that in the review. Not a lot of people said anything about elasticity or the mesh diamonds getting larger. But personally, I think that's a huge thing that is so small and minute, but it'll still make a slight amount of difference, which I think is cool. I don't know if StringKing meant for that to happen, but just something I found when I really stretched my pockets out. Compared to Type 4 to any type of mesh out there, it's quite difficult because it's really a mesh ahead of its time. It's something different. It's very textured. It's very lightweight. It has a small amount of elasticity to it, but enough to where you're going to really be able to choose where you want the pocket and get the most hold and feel out of your stick. But in comparison, like Stelios from Spartan String said, 4S almost feels a little too soft. For me, it's perfect, but I'd compare it to a broken-in Hero Mesh, but 4X is almost similar to StringKing 3S. So if you really like StringKing 3S mesh and you wish it would stay harder and you want a bit more grip per se or some better texture, 4X is probably your mesh. If you're a huge fan of 3S, but since it was such a thick weave and it wasn't really able to stretch or bag out, then 4S is probably your go-to. And that's nothing bad on either of them. I absolutely love 3S and 4S and 4X. 3X was a little iffy. I wasn't a big fan of how hard it was, but honestly, 4X is just soft enough and just stretchy enough, I guess you could say, that I could honestly see myself using 4X and being super comfortable with it, which is something I've never been a huge fan of semi-hard mesh, but 4X really seems like, it's a great mesh, and the stretchability of it really makes it so much better in my opinion. So one thing that I didn't see a lot of people cover on in reviews, and one thing I think that I've noticed that can really kind of make my review stand out and give you some more information that you may not already know about StringKing Type 4 mesh, is the elasticity and how it plays into stringing pockets. First thing, obviously, if you know anything about me or my channel or what I used to do, I used to do a lot of, before I was dyeing heads, I used to do a lot of CF37 pockets where I'd buy a bunch of heads and string them up with my exact replica pocket per se. And what was unique about my pocket was there was a lot of pull down all the way through the first half of the head. And from here there was a bunch of double ups and stacked SI and stuff. But really what came into it was how I stretched the pocket. I spent an extra 3 or 4 minutes with each pocket, stretching out the catch points here where the mesh was super tight, and the pocket so it sits higher. So naturally, for me, when I was going to cradle one-handed, where I doubled up in here, the pocket was nice and low. And when you go to shoot, since it was so stretched out and there was no really huge catch points here, the ball was able to sit nice and high and release, which I thought was revolutionary, which it really wasn't. It's just the way you stretch it. But with Type 4, the stringability and how much the mesh actually can stretch really plays a huge role in this. And what I mean by that is, if you lock the mesh on here early in the head, and let's say you're using a Mark II and you skip 4 holes and do a knot, you'll notice that the mesh itself, actually, the diamond you lock down stretches a huge amount. No rips, no tears, at least nothing I've seen yet. But what that does is, since it stretches a lot in the mesh, you can really get pulled down and achieve a nice tight channel. But the catch points here in the head actually don't really stay stiff. That's the problem with Type 3 was, no matter how you strung it, you had to really stretch it out, but the mesh didn't stretch a whole lot. It was just a nice thick mesh that was not meant to bag out whatsoever, so the diamonds wouldn't stretch. Stringing Type 4 it's really cool because you can really mess with it, do some crazy pull downs and stretch it, and you'll see what I mean. The diamond that you use to actually interlock to the head, so right here on the most outer 10 diamond row, it'll stretch out a lot, and it'll cause a bit of a catch point and natural forming of the channel, but it won't stretch out it won't stay so stiff that the channel doesn't stretch out. The channel actually will stretch out, so you can really string this stuff however you want, and the more you play with it, since it is a bit more elastic, it's going to stretch out, which allows for a unique feel, but also allows for really tight channels with, good feel, which I think is huge. Obviously 4S does stretch out more than 4X because it's a semi-soft version. So if you use a 4S pocket and you really stretch the mesh, you can really achieve some really great things. The only downside is if you stretch it way too much, there's a chance that your mesh may rip, but that's where the 6-month warranty comes into play. So really, I think it's one of the best meshes out there on the market. With all that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed this review. I'm trying a couple different things with the camera, so hopefully that the zooming in stuff, whatever works. But ideally, Type 4 mesh I think might just be the best mesh to date. For me personally, it's super thin, it's super lightweight, which a lot of people look for. Me personally, in a mesh, I don't really care a lot about. It stretches out a decent amount, but it's not going to bag out. So wherever you make the pocket and you stretch and you get the right depth, if you leave it how it is, it's not going to bag out on you, which is great. I think it's awesome, and you don't have to use a long bottom string. You don't have to do double ups and stuff. You can really just string it pretty much however you want, stretch it and leave it, and it's going to stay the same. With the elasticity, you can really pull down the mesh on the outer sides to really form a channel, but it's not going to be too tight almost no matter what you do, because the mesh will stretch out ever so slightly on the most outer diamonds, really allowing you to have a very secure knotted pocket, but still a nice formed channel that's actually going to perform. Other than that, 6-month warranty. You can't beat that for mesh. And StringKing, I think, is just dominating the game right now. You know, it doesn't bag out. It stretches nicely, but it keeps its shape. Type 4X is now softer than the old Type 3X, so it's a better comparison. You know, it's a better type of mesh for someone who wants something semi-hard that's broken in. 4X is your go-to. If you like a very soft pocket, 4S is the way to go. So me personally, I'll most likely stick with 4S just because I can really do some pull downs on the side and keep a nice straight form channel. But I do like the softer mesh just so the ball rolls around a bit. 4X, when you string it up, you can, the pocket basically rolls around a bit more. There's more movement in the pocket. It doesn't stay super stiff, but still stiff enough to where it's considered a semi-hard mesh. So thanks for watching, guys. As always, check out iconiclacrosse.bigartel.com. I've always got plenty of cool stuff up there for sale. Everything you guys purchase obviously helps me out with other stuff like a camera, more sticks to do and whatnot. Got a bucket full of heads going, but you can get Type 4S and 4X strung up in your stick with a pocket that I choose, or that I string. I'm sorry, not that I choose, that you guys get to choose, because I do carry 4S and 4X mesh in all StringKing materials as well as everything else. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know down below if you prefer 4S or 4X, and thanks for watching.